Now we are going to talk about green revolution and spread of capitalist agriculture. When the agricultural system was based on feudal inheritance, then new technology, high-yielding seed was introduced. At the time, the existence of many small, marginal and landless units enabled the zamindar to accumulate wealth through lease and high land rents and high interest rate created insurmountable obstacles in the development of capitalist agriculture. It is only the technological changes that generate the expectation of quantitative increase in expects benefits. Can the surplus be applied to productive activities? These changes These are obtained by the combined use of irrigation with seeds, fertilizer and pesticides. The necessary growth in agriculture could be achieved by relying on the rich cultivator and zamindars. It was an authorized view. Accordingly, physical and financial infrastructures were provided in these people. High yielding through government machinery, seeds, subsidized fertilizers and pesticides were provided. At the same time, favorable market conditions were also created by fixation of minimum prices. Initially, the spread of the new technology was limited to the irrigated wheat belt state of Punjab, Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh. By the mid 1970s, a new discovery was made in rice production and it reached the western states. During the 1980s, it spread to the eastern part of Bengal, Orissa and Bihar. It was only in 1980s that hybrid seed of cotton, oil and coarse cereals were introduced. Thus the expansion of capitalist production was carried out with the expansion of new technology in the intermediate state. From the diagram of the state with data on the ratio of hard labor, market trend and capitalist growth. Now we will see here the social change in rural India. It is true that the pace of change is very slow in rural communities as compared to urban communities. But even in villages today, there is a clear change in the status, occupation, education, attitude and behavior of the person. In fact, the rural community today is in a state of transition in which on the one hand new social values and behavior patterns are being understood in the rural area, where on the other hand the villagers have not been able to give up the traditional characteristics completely due to the influence of many circumstances. From this point of view, there exists a continuity between tradition and modernity in rural society. To explain the process of social change, the rural community loggers have divided it into three phases: inventions, diffusion and effect. Invention is a process in which new ideas are developed. In this way, invention basically means invention or innovation of the ideas, not material invention. Diffusion is the process by which new ideas are transmitted to a particular group or class. Change is the result of this process. Whether the innovations are accepted or rejected by the villagers, both the situation create change in the rural social life. When new ideas related to social change start influencing the social system, then naturally changes begin to arise in the structure and characteristic of the society. Gradually, new way of behavior start affecting many people in the group at the ideological level. The situation which arises from the change of thought, we call it immanent change. These changes are generally not affected by external conditions. Any other new ideas originate outside the social system, but due to the contact of the system with the group bound by new ideas, the change become apparent. then such a change is called contact change. In the context of rural life, it is necessary to keep in mind that new invention and ideas are influencing the villages today. They do not originate in the rural society itself but in some external groups. But gradually it starts affecting the entire rural life. How does this process work for change in life? This can be explained mainly on two grounds. In the first community, whenever a member gets knowledge of innovation and accept it, then gradually other villagers also establish contact with him to get knowledge of new way of behavior. This single person start acting as the main communicator for, or you can say key communication for the spread of new mode of behavior. This process is called selective contact change. The second situation is that in which a government official or by establishing contact with the people of the village by the planner, they are encouraged to adopt new way of outside. The change arising out of this situation is called direct contact change. In today's life, both of these, it is the process which have brought about widespread changes in all areas of rural life. This means that industrialization, urbanization, education, political movement and social acts are those conditions producing changes which can be considered as belonging to the first class, whereas village, panchayat, literacy, community development program and other similar development schemes can be included in the second category related to rural transformation. Due to the effect of all these conditions, the major changes that have taken place in the rural community today can be briefly explained. The changes related to marriage are mainly seen in the field of child marriage, mismatch, widow marriage, intercaste marriage and dowry system. Indian rural life, marital relationship has been considered as a permanent relationship of whole life, but due to the influence of Western philosophy of life, industrial culture, now even in village, divorce is not seen as a social crime. Until recently, the determination of the marriage relation of children was entirely a matter of the will of the parents and the doer of the family. But now there has been a vast change in the situation. The educational people of the village have also started to understand that for the purpose of ending child marriage, sweetness of marital relation and organization of family life, it is appropriate to give limited freedom to boys and girls to choose life partner. Not only has it happened that if a person marries an intercaste, the nature of social disapproval or condemnation of life has not been as serious as before. Villagers towards child marriage, the average age of marriage in rural communities is still very low as compared to urban community. But due to the influence of modern education, industrialization and urban culture, the age of marriage has increased to a great extent than before. The justification for the increase in the age of marriage was first accepted by the upper caste, and later the backward and scheduled caste started increasing the marriage, taking the upper caste as their reference group. And changes in rural caste structure. The caste system has been the most important basis of the rural social structure of India. After independence in India, there have been so many changes in the rules and beliefs related to the caste system. Some people believe that after the attainment of independence in India, due to attainment on legal equality of all caste and the abolition of untouchability by law, social distance on the basis of caste in the village has definitely reduced. It is a definite fact that today the concept of untouchability is not related to a caste as much as there was clear division between different castes in the traditional rural society on the basis of food related restriction. And in the village, a young influenced by modern education, urban culture, industrial environment is emerging, which sees the restriction related to the caste system only as a stereotype. Changes in social life. The field of social life is very broad, but for the case of study, we are going to explain the nature of rural social change by mentioning the change related to family, marriage, caste, structure, values and attitude under it. Changes in family life. Indian rural family have been revered in the form of joint family since very ancient time, but due to the effect of present conditions, vast changes have been taken place in the structure of family of rural joint family. Most of the villagers are now beginning to consider the joint family as inconvenient for themselves. As a result of this, the family is no longer the most important institution to establish control in the village. In the traditional family, patriarchal family, every member was ready to fulfill unlimited responsibility selflessly and sacrificially. But today, the new generation of people do not consider it. As a result of which, the characteristic of family is getting lost in the village. This means that now most of the people are not ready to surrender their personality development only in the name of family prestige or tradition. Change in rural marriage and change in rural values and belief. Just point out these things. Changes in rural economic life. Traditional rural economic life of India was completely dependent on agriculture, and the nature of agriculture was mainly related to consumption. After independence, when many development plan of rural reconstruction were implemented in India as a result of the extensive changes that started taking place in rural economic structure. In the field of agriculture, all villagers are adopting modern technology according to their needs. And the condition of this class is improving rapidly due to the abolition of a bonded labor system by law. As a result, not only has the gap between big and a small farmer in the village been reduced, but the tendency of monopoly on the agriculture production is also decreasing continuously. Due to the effect, the economic condition of ordinary villager could not improve as much as big farmers have benefited from this scheme. Changes in political life, and as a result, there has been a significant change in the power structure and political participation in the rural area. And some people are of the opinion that the entry of political parties in the village has led to the spread of various political theories on the ideology of the villagers. And political consciousness has now become associated with the regional and all India level. Changes in religious life. In the tradition, the importance of religion was paramount, and all the work at the individual and collective level was conducted on the basis of religious life. Being completely dependent on nature, religion was the most important agent of individual and social control. Today, due to the spread of new technology and education in rural life, important change have been started taking place in the traditional form of religion. There is always a contradictory relationship between religion and science. When the influence of science increases in any field of practice, then the religion remains a passive institution. Perhaps this is the reason of the religion rules are no longer enforced as strictly in the village, because the meaning of the beliefs and rules related to the religion has changed. And now it is not considered unreasonable to ignore the interest of the entire village for the sake of the individual selfishness. The result of this is that today the village has the characteristics of self-reliance. In the field of consumption, there has been an increasing in the prevalence of such items in the village which are not compatible with the means and community life of the village. Due to the increasing imbalance between resources and need, there has been an increase in property-related crime in the village too. Factor of change in rural life. Now, I will count it. Various scholars have analyzed the present change arising in rural life in the context of many conditions. Dr. A.R. Desai has divided the fact of rural change in two major parts, the consciousness and unconscious. For example, different type of natural condition, different condition resulting from mechanization and cultural element are unconscious factor which create a situation of change as a process. Under the consensus factor, Dr. Desai has mentioned many such methods by which change is produced in a systematic manner. 6 methods are important: persuasive method, demonstration method, compulsory method, method of social pressure, educational method, and contact method. All these methods explain such effort by which villagers are trained in a particular method to bring change in their lives and adopt new type of ideas and behavior. If we want to analyze rural changes on a coordinated basis of all these conscious and unconscious factors, then they can be understood mainly in the context of the following factor. Urbanization. Urbanization is the main factor for social changes. And new means of communication. Traditional rural communities were self-sufficient and simple because the need of the villagers were fulfilled with their own village. But new means of communication change a rural life. And mode of modern education, also agent of social change in rural life. Democratic leadership and land reform. New land reform in India had a huge impact on rural life. Hereafter, the abolition of zamindari, when the villagers got land ownership, when they got in the independent right, naturally their economic condition started improving rapidly. With the improvement in the economic condition, the life of the villagers started getting free from those traditions, superstitions, and rituals which still some time ago they considered the only basis of their helpless life. From this point of view, land reform has proved to be indirect but important factor of rural social change. New technology of agriculture, new techniques of agriculture, social legislation, and development schemes. And next point, role of industrialization, urbanization in rural transformation. Even here we could add role of multinational companies, role of globalization, industrialization and urbanization in rural transformation. As an agriculture community, we have traditional form of religion, politics, education, production, social system for thousands of years. In this traditional rural life, the stability of primary relation agriculture, cottage industry were seen as the only accepted way of life. Due to the inability to compete with the production in large quantity, the cottage industry in the village became new. Lakhs of people engaged in this occupation. Villagers have been more conscious in areas like ambition toward education, secular orientation, sense of equality, self-confidence, and political participation. Farmers have also become more aware of different types of innovation and are trying to adopt them to the maximum extent. All these changes are clear sign of modernization in the village. Globalization and crisis in Indian agriculture. In 1990s, a structural reform programs and the WTO trade system created a new crisis in rural living. The new economy has to some extent brought us back to the colonial era, where the process of accumulation and utilization is once again being controlled by metropolitan urban capital. End of state intervention. The state has withdrawn its previously declared role of market intervention for the economic security of domestic producers and for the protection of all small producers and vulnerable segment among them. And many small and medium-sized irrigation network projects remain incomplete, not only because of being controversial but also due to the paucity of funds. The energy sector has been privatized in the last decade, and water privatization is a major issue in the coming decade. The scheme to meet the economic need of a small and marginal farmer have been completely abolished. Entry of industry in the Indian agriculture. A fundamental changes in the structure of the international political economy relating to food is the emergence of multinational agricultural food regulation which seek to organize production and use in national economies according to their investment and marketing objectives. Due to the land restriction law, the entry of industry into direct agriculture production in India has been prohibited. Cultivation on a large scale as required by the companies is not allowed due to the following restriction. Only the land of plantation area has been exempted from the Restriction Act. Capitalist farming, which was controlled by foreign companies, is present in the area since the pre-independence period. The average size of cultivation is 88 hectares in Assam and 59 hectares in Kerala. With the new definition of land reclamation, there is increasing pressure to allow companies to work in the field of direct agricultural production, especially horticulture, floriculture and agroforestry. Now the demand is to increase the land restriction limit to a great extent or it should be abolished completely. As already mentioned that many state governments are ready to accept the demand. The Maharashtra government has already taken the initiative to exempt unions, companies and cooperatives from the land lease law for the purpose of horticulture. Such unit can buy bajra, waste or khar land and take cultivable land on lease. The area of farm can be as large as 100,000 acres. During this time, the companies have acquired vast area of land in Odisha and southern state for aquaculture. In this process, a large number of small and sogant farmers have been uprooted. Many companies are entering into agroforestry by cheating the Land Prohibition Act. They buy the generic and hand it over to individual on payment of a substantial amount and promise them attractive profit in return. Nevertheless, the design of the agricultural market to control overpopulation in the agricultural sector is far more ambitious than what it can achieve from direct agriculture. With the consent of the Government of India, agricultural trade is increasingly controlling the flow of investment and output in the agricultural sector. There is framework to change the method of the land industry according to their heart benefit under the games on contract farming tag. The cultivators are employed to produce and supply a specified product of a specified quality in a specified quantity at a specified price at a specified time. The company also provided seeds, fertilizer, technical loans, farming equipment to the farmer. And on the other hand, the agro-processing industry, which was earlier reserved for small-scale industries, has been open to big corporations and multinational companies. In the coming year, very rapid change in land use and land ownership pattern can be expected in Indian agriculture. The transition from a state control system to a market control system dominated by large multinational companies has affected different sections of the farming community in different ways. Confusion prevailing in the group of big farmer on the neoliberal system. And on the one hand, they think that trade liberalization, diversity of agricultural products and entry of agricultural trade are beneficial for them. On the other hand, they are apprehensive that they will not be able to compete due to cheap imports through huge subsidies in the agricultural sector in developed country. That's why Joshi welcomed the proposal for the Eqbal draft of Uruguay round peasant movement in Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka opposed it. Management of farming on lease by multinational companies, essentially with medium or large farmer. Big farmer along with the industry sector are pressurizing the state government to amend the land restriction law and integrate it on lease land. Micro-level studies show that the opposite tendency theory, which was prevalent only in Punjab and Haryana during 1970s and 1980s, and spread rapidly to the state in 1990. But it should be noted that in the new scenario, the large group of farmers is presently bewildered by the declining trend in the prices of primary commodities in the world market and unsustainability of small and medium farms and increasing landlessness. Many small and medium farmers have shifted from production of core cereals to the production of soya beans, new variety of cotton and oilseed. Due to this change, the expenses need to be increased significantly. Small farmers are completely ruined. The indebtedness and consequent suicides by farmers in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka have attracted the attention of the media. Whatever they commit suicide or not, whether they commit suicide or not, a small and ordinary farmer are rapidly depriving themselves of their land resource. Only for highly skilled people there is a space. The social service sector of agriculture itself has the potential to absorb additional labor at low productivity and low income level. Under the state-supported industrialization of the Indian economy, the agricultural-oriented transition has reached a different position. The new liberal global order in the 21st century has brought about a qualitative changes in the functioning of the non-preventable national economies around the world. Such a trend is already visible. There is no outside employment for the labor force drawn out of agriculture. The consolidation of rural production was carried out effectively, which was important for the introduction of modern technology and mechanization. Green Revolution and the spread of capitalist agriculture. When the agricultural system was based on feudal domination, then new technology was introduced. The existence of many small marginal landless units enabled the zamindari to accumulate wealth through lease and increase in inequality among farmers. The following effects of increasing capitalist tendency in Indian agriculture are noteworthy. Increase in inequality among farmers. The state has opened new dimensions of opportunities, providing benefit to the big farmers. The cultivators and zamindars themselves took their land back from lease market for cultivation. Reduced employment opportunities in agriculture. Capitalist agriculture destroys the ability to absorb labor in the agricultural sector in an uncertain way. The movement of rich peasants emerged in Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, indeed in Punjab and Haryana. He put a stop to agriculture tax and demanded favorable conditions in agricultural trade. Producer class in goods. In France, the stubborn agriculture did not allow capitalist influence to take place for a long time and frustrated it. At whatever stage the bourgeoisie's peasantry rises and whether it occurs or not, it is the center of the state in the midst of pre-capitalist structure and property relation and agrarian transition. Even today in most of rural areas, the identity of a person is based on his folk culture. In such a situation, the individual may not be ready to completely eliminate the folk culture in order to maintain its regional conformity. The process of modernization in the Indian rural community has also greatly influenced the folk culture. As a process, not only new laws were created, but every person was given the right to openly criticize such traditional practices which are conservative and hinder the progress of society. Under traditional folk culture, rural economy was not based on organized market and the individual produced only for his own consumption. In order to promote and spread dance, music, and drama related to folk culture, arrangements are being made in the villages, and many villagers are also spread the culture of their area to other area so that they can spread more and more through it. This is the reason that today the guardian deity of the village is not recognized as it was till some time ago. It is clear from the above discussion that the process of modernization has affected the entire rural life, including folk culture, in a big way. In spite of his partial truth, it is not entirely appropriate. The reality is that even after various processes of change, the existence of folk culture in rural life exists in its modified form. And a scheme of rural reconstruction in India. Now we will talk about a scheme of